NATO is alarmed about Russia's military buildup on Ukraine's borders, and foreign ministers from the alliance are meeting today in Latvia to discuss a response. About a month ago, the U.S. reported that Russian troops were gathering in large number in several cities near the Russian border with Belarus and Ukraine. Russia says it is entitled to station its troops on its territory, and they pose no threat. But NATO and Ukraine say Moscow may be preparing to launch an attack.
Russian troops near the Ukraine border in early November. The U.S. called it unusual activity and raised alarm over a possible invasion. Ukraine responded with its own show of force, military exercises in its border region.
We have complete control over our borders, and we are fully prepared for any escalation.
NATO pledges its support to Ukraine and is warning against Russian aggression.
It is also clear that if Russia uses force against Ukraine, that will have costs, that will have consequences, and therefore we continue to call on Russia to de-escalate.
Tensions are rising between Russia and the West over Kiev's renewed bid to join the NATO military alliance. For the Kremlin, any expansion of military aid to Ukraine is a red line.
We can't ignore these threats to the security of Russia. We will react to them as appropriate, adequately to the situation.
Ukraine already had a war scare with Russia earlier this year. In April, Russia deployed tens of thousands of troops, aircraft, and missiles within striking distance of Ukraine. Moscow called it a military exercise, and after weeks of posturing, said the troops were being withdrawn. Western military experts say the maneuvers this November were less visible, perhaps on purpose.
We don't have clarity into Moscow's intentions, but we do know its playbook.
What Ukraine and the West fear is a repeat of 2014, when Russian troops entered Ukraine, followed by the annexation of Crimea, and a bloody war between Russia-backed separatists and Ukrainian troops in the eastern Donbas region. Despite several attempts at peace talks, it's a fight with no end in sight.
DW's Alexander is in Riga and joins us for more on this story. Hi, Alexander. It's good to see you. We mentioned that NATO foreign ministers are meeting. What kind of response could we see from the alliance to this Russian troop buildup?
NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg told us that the main goal right now is to prevent any Russian aggression against Ukraine. And of course, a key issue for NATO is now to strike a right balance of military deterrence and diplomacy. And Stoltenberg told us that there are still communication channels that are open, even though Russia has suspended its mission to NATO. So both sides are talking, but there are, of course, other options on the table, more military aid for Ukraine, for example, or more weapon systems. That is nothing that NATO as an alliance would do, but some NATO allies could consider providing Ukraine with more military aid and weapons. Just think what the US is doing. They have already delivered anti-tank missiles in the past to Ukraine. So all of that is here on the table. And I think that everyone knows here that NATO needs to craft an approach that neither appeases Russia nor causes further or provokes further tensions.
Well, Russia says that these talks of an attack are just U.S. propaganda. I mean, why do NATO members fear an invasion of Ukraine is here on the cards?
There are incredible intelligence reports saying that Russia is moving its troops across its territory, that the Kremlin is amassing troops up to 94,000 soldiers at the border with Ukraine. And NATO is saying that we are talking here about tanks, artillery, electronic warfare systems. And of course, no one knows what Putin is planning, and as you said, the Kremlin is denying that they are planning an invasion. But we have to consider Russia's track record in the region, the annexation of Crimea in 2014, Russia's support for separatists in the eastern Ukraine. So NATO is very concerned.
Alexander, if an invasion were to take place, Jens Stoltenberg has said there will be consequences, there will be costs. What would those be?
Well, I asked him just exactly the same question yesterday, and he didn't want to elaborate, just saying that we should consider what NATO has already done, what they did after 2014. They increased their presence on NATO's eastern flank. We have 4 battle groups in the Baltic states and in Poland, and there were sanctions imposed against Russia. But the question, of course, is what really they can do and how important Ukraine is for the alliance and what options could be on the table. That's what NATO foreign ministers are going to discuss here in Riga.
Alexander von Namen reporting there for us from Riga. Thank you very much.